Ever stopped and looked at a piece of artwork and thought, oh wow, that looks exactly like what it's trying to create? Well, that something usually is realism. And no, it is not what you think. Realism is not about creating photo perfection, but it's a combination of techniques like creating the illusion of depth, texture, and life, all of which make your art feel more real. Hi, my name is Leanna, and I'm a multidisciplinary artist. And today I'll be breaking down my top tips for making your art feel more realistic. And yes, that means less perfect. So let's break down what realism is. Realism isn't about copying every detail that you see, it's about understanding what you're creating. Things like how light hits a surface or how color shifts a shadow. Also, how texture can give personality to your subject. Whether you're creating portraits, still lifes, or landscapes, all of these techniques are what make people say, wait, I know exactly what you're creating. So let's grab your mediums and let's dive in. All of these observations are what makes a difference between an artwork that looks flat and less dimensional and just a little bit more realistic. So let's start with the foundation, seeing like an artist. If you want to start making realistic art, the truth is you need to start training your eyes before your hands. So for my first tip, observe more and assume less. While you're creating your work, really slow down and take a look at what your subject is. Observe the shadows and the highlights. Understand the composition and shapes and forms that you're seeing. When it comes to color, don't just assume that just because a highlight is white, that it's going to come out as pure white. Often you'll find that in the highlights and shadows that there's complexity behind them. Usually there's a warm or cool tone to them because of the light source. The more you see, the more your painting comes to life. In my apple print, you'll see the complexities in my subject matter. You'll notice that the whites are actually more yellow and more warmer in tone. All of these things are what makes this painting a little more realistic. The next tip that I have is to start observing the values in your subject matter before the color. If your values, your lights and darks, are off, your subject will never look realistic, no matter how perfect your colors are. Try first working in grayscale studies of your subject matter, or even using underpaintings to understand how contrast creates depth. To get a better understanding of the values in my apple painting, what I did was create an understudy drawing just using graphite. This way, it was easy for me to distinguish the darkest to lightest values, and it made it easier when mixing colors and knowing where to apply more paint and less paint to the painting. For my third tip, your edges matter. Soft edges will naturally push things back, while hard edges will try to pull them forward. If everything has the same amount of sharpness, it will naturally look flat. So use your mediums to control the focus, blur some areas and sharpen others. This is how you help guide your viewer's eye into understanding the different elements in your composition and subject matter. In my apple painting, I used edges in the reds. What I did was I used the red colors to help contour the shape of each apple. That way, the viewer's eye is guided to see the different apples within the bowl and distinguish each individual fruit from the next. Now, this is where realism starts to build, and it all comes to layering. For my fourth tip, Build layers and don't rush. Realistic paintings have depth because they're built gradually. Start thin and transparent. Then build thicker layers as you refine the form and light of your subject matter. In my apple painting, you can see this example through the amount of layering that I did. I first started with a yellow underpainting, and then I built the forms of each apple through a darker yellow so that I could distinctly see each shape of the apple. As I continued onto my painting, I created depth and dimension through thin layers with the paint. This way, it makes the apples look like it has texture and brings some realism to the fruit. And for my fifth tip, pay attention to light reflected in the color shifts. The truth is, light bounces, and it will often absorb the colors that are next to each other. So for instance, when red is next to a white object, that red will be subtly reflected into the white. So by adding those small color shifts, this is what makes your work feel a little bit more alive. That's the difference between something that looks less dimensional and something that looks a little bit more real. Pay attention to the transition and the flow between the two colors and how they gradually absorb each other. In my apple painting, I noticed these color shifts in the reds, yellows, and greens. As I was making each apple, I was considering how each color shifted and blended from one another to create contrast and depth. And what I would do is, in the blending of these colors, it started to create the form of each apple, making it look a little more realistic and a little less flat. So here's the truth. Realism isn't about perfection, but it's about your presence. When your viewer feels like they could touch your work or step into it, that is realism. And I guess that's the beauty of being an artist and a creative. You see, I painted a bowl of apples, but what I observed and emulated and captured could be completely different from another fellow creative. The thing is that you are just trying to emulate and observe and create what you see. So art really isn't about making something that's realistic or perfect, but it's about taking your viewer to the very moment of what you observed. So don't rush, take time to observe, build layers and play with edges, and let the light do the storytelling. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more art-related content. And comment below which art tip you found the most helpful and you're going to try to capture in your next creative piece of work. Remember, realism isn't about copying what you see, it's ultimately about learning and observing what you see more differently. Thank you guys for watching my video. Again, these video series are part of my 2026 print drop, which does include this apple painting. If you'd like to be one of the first to purchase it as a print, please subscribe to my socials, which you can find here, and turn on your notifications. Thank you again, and I'll see you next week, guys. Bye.